Welcome to the Independent Producers Organization program. This is the program that showcases independent producers, their productions, and provides a forum for discussing issues which affect independent television producers here in the Pacific Northwest.
Welcome to the Independent Producers Organization live showcase. What more can I say?
That's about it. Live showcase.
I got it right. Okay. And coming to you from Portland tonight. How's that for a sunset?
Yeah, we got to thank Bill Olson for those photographs too. Before
really get some good stuff up there. Okay, our guest tonight is Dan Christensen, and hope I pronounced that right. Running for House District 50, and I had a number of people that I called, but he's the one that came through tonight, and I really do appreciate that. So, do you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and
where the District 50 is? And
yeah, I'm running for state representative, House District 50. That's Gresham and the East County, and the district sits entirely inside Multnomah County. The north border is about Burnside, and runs down to the Persimmon Golf Course, and then we out about Barlow High School, and then west into Portland. We have a couple of precincts inside Portland, so I cover several different school districts. I'm on the school board right now in the Gresham Barlow School District, and I've been serving on there for 5 years, and so be on the ballot in November. Everybody's going to be getting their ballots here in about 2 weeks. So
for the school board also?
No, the school board races are held anytime there's an odd numbered year. That's when they're called a special election, and so those are the elections usually in May. Where you will see candidates for education service districts, soil districts, water districts, school boards, community college boards, and it's a great place. I always encourage people if you have if you live in an area that has a school, there's an opportunity to become part of that school board every 2 years, and we have in the state of Oregon that is the largest single body of elected officials. Is school board members. I believe the number is about 15,000 school board members who are elected in the state of Oregon.
Okay.
And, so
every 2 years.
You generally hold a 4-year term, but every 2 years there are open seats on most school boards.
Yeah.
And so it's a great place for people who want to get involved in the political process to run and get a chance to have a say in how taxpayer dollars are spent. That's sort of how I ended up doing this. I wanted to be able to get an opportunity to look at how taxpayer dollars are being stewarded and have something to say about that. Even our district, the Gresham Barlow district, has 12,000 students. We're not the largest in the state, but we're certainly large, and we're overseeing about $140 million a year of taxpayer money.
Wow.
That's a lot of money for
just
a certain number of people.
So where does that money come from?
Well, from all of the sources you might, ultimately, every dollar that the government gets is a sacred dollar that was earned by the sweat and the hard work of Oregon citizens. And
but there's federal and state money and local money. And
so it's parsed out, but it's property tax revenues at the local level. There's the state school fund from the state of Oregon, and then of course there are federal dollars that make up that entire pot. So our all funds budget is $135 million.
Well, it sounds like you got in to learn the ropes, and you learned them.
A little bit,
a little bit.
After 5 years, I'm still a beginner.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn. So while we were talking earlier, and you said that you moved down from Seattle, was it for a job-oriented thing, or was it for comfort that you decided you were out to live in a smaller city?
Well, actually, I'm an Oregonian by choice. My wife and I at that time had 4 children, and had reached a stage of life where really we could we could kind of choose where we wanted to live, and had opportunity to visit some friends in Gresham, and realized this is really where we would like to raise our kids. So we deliberately chose Gresham, and love Gresham. It's the place we've raised our family. My children all attended schools in the Gresham-Barlow School District, and my youngest child is still a student in the Gresham-Barlow School District. So this is our home, and I understand people who are lifelong Oregonians, here by an accident of birth. I was here. I'm an Oregonian by hard choice. I deliberately chose to be an Oregonian. I'm very proud of that decision.
Do you ski by any chance? Well, I think about that.
I used to.
Oh.
I used to, but actually, I graduated high school in western Colorado, so it was state law, you had to ski there.
Yeah. Or leave the state, huh?
Yeah.
Really?
No, it wasn't really a state law. I was being facetious.
I knew it
Yes,
couldn't be too real, but
So,
you never know.
yeah, you never know.
Right.
Well, there's a lot to be learned on school boards. I never thought about that. That they of course, it's always economics. It's always fiduciary. Just about any position you hold, and you plan on leaving that behind you if you get elected?
I don't know. I haven't made that decision yet. There are several representatives. I know Representative Mark Johnson, who's currently serving in the state legislature, is also a school board member out in Hood River, and he does both. And so it's there are some that are managed to do both, and I haven't made that decision yet as to whether or not I'll try to do both or not. So
well, it's a constant job, whereas the job that you're running for is only what, 6 months a year or 6 months every other year or something.
Well,
I forget how it works.
Well, the state legislature.
I was surprised.
The state legislature is a full-time position in terms of being available for constituent work,
Right.
and interfacing with the people back home. The legislature is actually in session, they have a session in January to kind of kick things off, and then the legislative session runs anywhere from February through May, and then there's a session every year. The ones every other year are a little bit shorter, and so there is a season of time when you're in Salem every day full time, and then the rest of the time you're back home living under the laws that you passed or prevented, and so.
I always wondered how do most legislators down there have full-time jobs?
Yes, you really have to. And again, I don't want to speak for anyone but me, and I've never been there. So, but yeah, it is a part-time job.
Yeah.
In terms of the salary, nobody's going to get rich being a state legislator in the state of Oregon.
Right.
So yes, everybody has professions and jobs back home.
Well, I thought we might get to the seat. We talked about it earlier, and the first thing I always ask is it an open seat, or are you going up against an incumbent?
This is an open seat. Greg Matthews has held the seat for the last 6 years, and has served the community very faithfully and very well. And he had an opportunity to become fire chief. He's been a firefighter.
Really?
And had an opportunity to become fire chief, and so he elected to not file in the primary. And so we had one candidate who had filed for the Democrat nomination. Nobody filed for the Republican nomination. And so we had a situation where there were no Republicans on the ballot in the primary and 2 Democrats running for that office. And so I was contacted. The ballots had already been out for about a week, and I was contacted by the House Republican leadership and asked if I would allow my name to be campaigned as the write-in candidate for the Republican nomination.
Okay.
And so after some days of prayer and reflection and really considering it, went ahead and said, yeah, go ahead, you can campaign my name. And we had 386 Republicans who wrote my name in, and that was well more than enough to secure the Republican nomination. And so I am on the ballot in November, and we have a race.
And when will those ballots be coming out?
About a week and a half now.
All right, that's another question I was thinking about. When it first came out, I was not for the voting by mail, and now now that we have it, and I've seen there's some good points to it. Is it something you do think is a good deal?
I'm a little old school. I liked going to the polling
Same
place.
here, yeah.
I think I like the convenience of voting by mail. I can see, in the old days, you'd go to a polling place, and you'd walk in. the ballot, you would be handed your ballot.
Yeah.
You would fill it out. You'd hand it back to an elections worker, and the chain of custody was very, very secure. Now you have a lot of people touching those ballots, from mail, postal employees to elections workers, volunteers. Those ballots can be touched by a lot of people, and so I guess I'm a little old school. I preferred the old way of doing it, but I certainly do like the convenience. And there's a lot to be said for being able to have your ballot here, your voter's pamphlet statement here, and taking some time. I do like that aspect of allowing the voters a more deliberative process. Because in the old-fashioned polling place, you kind of had that pressure. I got to get this done. I got people waiting in line behind me.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's hope somebody's waiting anyway.
Yeah, well,
because
there
you know,
usually was, yeah.
this is the off year. What do they call it? The 2014 is the off voting. That's voting is supposed to fall down. But both Republican and Democrats are pushing hard to get their people out there to vote.
Sure.
And hopefully they will, because it's just as important in its own way as the major elections.
Well, the only thing not on the ballot is a president. Otherwise,
that's true.
Yeah.
It's a very, it's a very important election. We are electing at the state level. We're electing 60 state representatives to go to the House of Representatives. We're electing, I believe, half of our Senate in the state, and don't quote me on that. I'm not too focused on the Senate.
I don't think Wyden's running. So.
Oh no, I'm talking about the state
the
state of Oregon, and then at the federal level, all of the House of Representatives is up for re-election every 2 years, just like in Oregon. And of course, we have one of our senators up for
Merkley.
So that we have a race there for U.S. Senate.
Well, you wouldn't know that Merkley's running because there's a lot of commercials from the other side right now.
Yeah,
They've
maybe
been playing
he's got some thoughts about that race. I'm overwhelmed by all the stuff. She won't get back to me. Weeby won't get back to me.
Dr. Webby?
Yeah, she won't get back to me.
Great lady. I've met her, and I think she's a good candidate. One of the things I like about her is some of the things that people are saying are the negatives. She's not a politician. She, and so she's, they're saying, well, she's made some blunders as a politician. Yay. She's going to bring fresh eyes to this. One of the reasons I'm in the race. We've had a lot of people who know all about politics and know all about the inside of government, and I think we need some new eyes and some new perspective. We've had insiders for a long time telling us on the outside how to live our lives, and it's time for those of us on the outside to go tell government how to live its life. And
sure.
I'm a strong believer in a caged government and free-range citizens. And I think I like the idea that, how it is when the legislature gathers together, a lot of times the people sit in fear because they fear the government's about to speak. And that's not the way it should be. Really, what should happen when the legislature gathers is that the bureaucrats sit in fear because the people are about to speak. It's our job as elected officials to wield the power of the people, to govern the government, not to wield government's power to govern the people who elected us. And so one of the things I hope to do as your legislator is to be able to look the bureaucrats and the agency heads in the eye and remind them, we're the boss, you're the employee, we're the parent, you're the child. And make sure we don't get those roles reversed. The people are the sovereign in our system of government. Okay. And elected officials are the wielders of the people's power.
That brings up a point that I've asked a couple of folks over, not recently, but there's a real conundrum, because if you're an elected official, do you do the will of the people or do you vote your values? And sometimes there's a distinction between the two. Well, the people may want something, and and not you in particular, but the person may realize that goes against their values, or they may be in on knowledge that the people don't necessarily have. And to me, that's a real conundrum.
Well, not really. I mean, we are a representative democracy,
right?
And we elect officials to represent us. But ultimately, you elect people based on your sense of their values, and the will of the majority tends to get reflected. But I think a good elected official is going to maintain the position of outsider, perpetual. One of the reasons I support term limits. Common sense term limits. I'm not talking about 2 years and you're out, but good common sense term limits that would obviously allow people to get elected, gain experience, become more experienced legislators. But I think that it's very healthy if every time the legislature gathers that there's a whole bunch of new faces there where the bureaucracies have to make their case to people who don't already know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they on the school board they laugh at me sometimes. They call me the acronym police, because, especially at our public meetings. I'm always challenging those presenting to us out from the school administration to not use the acronyms.
Oh, okay.
Because the people, you know, when the administration in our school district looks at me, I want them to see thousands of people standing behind me. I represent those people. They don't speak our acronyms. And so it's very important that I maintain an attitude of representing these people to the administration, not becoming such an insider that I begin to represent the administration to the people. My job is to remain an outsider and wield the power of the people. And I want to be the people's eyes, the people's ears, if necessary, the people's sharp elbows in stewarding those sacred dollars, because government doesn't have $1 to spend but what was earned by the hard work of somebody who's really applying themselves. And so I'm not so much a public servant. You know, the public servants are the moms and the dads who work hard to raise their kids and feed them and clothe them and raise them well. Those are public servants.
Build the economy.
Right, the entrepreneurs who start a job. So as an elected official, my job is to serve the public servants and to provide, to wield their power of the people, so that government provides a context where people can live their lives freely. That's the role of government, is to provide broad, safe parameters where the people can exercise their liberties. And as it relates to the economy, government really should be the guardrails and not roadblocks and speed bumps and toll booths and detours. Because right now we have a system in place from our income tax code, which is tiered from 4 to 9%, and the way regulations look at how people run their businesses, we have government playing whack-a-mole with anybody who sticks their head up a little bit too high. And we've got to get there and look the bureaucrats in the eye and remind them, your job is to facilitate commerce, not prevent it.
Well, I know
I'd rather have you representing me. That's all I know.
Well, I don't think you live in my district, so I don't think you can vote for me.
I'm not.
well, I know back in post-colonial days, I think that was one of the main fights going on. I think it was between Jefferson and Madison. A lot of things were having to do with the party. I mean, I think Jefferson was thinking that parties would be the end of the country, and I think Madison was all for them. And it was originally set up, you know, like George Washington. You serve 4 years, 8 years, and you go back to your farm. It wasn't. I don't think this system was originally designed for there to be career politicians. And of course, it got that way, and Jefferson was right that once you get parties, then those parties will take on a life of their own. And I'm not saying that we should go back to the other way, but that is something we need to take in mind. I think that gets to your point of, you know, being an outsider. If you're an insider and then you're working through your party, then it's the party's always on the inside.
Well, it goes back to your original question about the will of the people. In maintaining that sort of outsider status as somebody, I'm here representing the people. I don't want to become a bureaucratic insider, but I do need to develop an understanding of what's going on in those bureaucracies. And obviously once I'm elected, there will be a very steep learning curve, you know, as I go to Salem. But I've got to maintain good contact with my people. I've got to maintain good contact, because irrespective of whether or not I'm doing their will, I at least need to know their will, and that only comes from, you know, the hard groundwork. I mean, I've knocked on a lot of doors out in my district, just winning votes the old-fashioned way. I'm looking people in the eye, I'm shaking their hand, and I'm asking for their vote.
Yeah.
And if I don't ask, I don't deserve it.
That's true. You know, you mentioned a little while ago that Weeby, whatever, she's an outsider, and how long would it take for her to be an insider? I think Merkley was elected to the Senate. I don't remember what he was doing before that.
He was he was in the Oregon State Legislature. He was Speaker of the House here.
That's right. He was,
and you know, so he had, and nothing wrong with that. You know, there's a lot to be said for that as well. For, you know, having served in elective office before you go off to Washington D.C. But you know, we're in very challenging times right now, and I think some a fresh set of eyes is going to be very, very helpful at all levels of government right now. I think we need new eyes looking at these problems.
Sure.
So do you have any thoughts on we be backing out of these TV? That did you look at that or read about that?
Backing
I
out.
have no
don't know.
thoughts at all about that.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're saying. She backed out of what?
Television interviews with what's his name?
Jeff Merkley.
Merkley.
Yes.
He backed out of it, or didn't show up, or didn't do something.
Well, I'm not involved with the Webby campaign,
Okay.
so you'd probably need to talk to her people. But
Well, you tried.
yeah,
Yeah,
the,
Well, I typically would never vote Republican, but you know that I still keep it open for
let me ask
individual
So
candidates.
let me ask. I'll turn it in the interview. Why is that? Is there an issue that I'm a Republican?
I know that.
And you don't live in my district, but what do you feel are the issues that would prevent that?
Well, let's see.
Or what do you feel it would take? I'm going back to being a salesman here, but what would it take?
What would it take? Well, not taking Coke money for one thing.
Okay.
You know, like Webby, at least they're saying that she's taking a lot of Coke money.
Yeah, but you don't
And
know
for the
that.
same, well, no, I don't know that, but I think that's probably true because the Koch brothers are putting money in a lot of elections that they feel that the Democrat is a possibility of beating them. And you know, it's just political dynamics. It has nothing to do with individuals. And you know, it gets back to you just throw on me what I was going to throw on you.
Yeah.
Eventually, is why would you want to be a Republican rather than a Democrat? And you're asking me, you know, why? I don't consider myself a
Well, that's
Democrat.
interesting.
I'm actually more of I can't say independent because that's a party in this state. Unfortunately, you have to be undeclared
Yeah.
in this state, which really is terrible. The state of affairs because basically you are independent of the other parties. But the main concern I have with the Republican perspective and mentality is they try to blame the government for things that I think that are more big business's fault. I think we really do need to protect the environment. I really think we do need to have regulations. Sure, they can be overdone and they can be administered by a bloated bureaucracy, but at the same time, we can't be having mining tailings going down and destroying rivers. We can't have fracking, poisoning people, and all the different things that are going on with the oil and the gas and the coal they're trying to bring through this part of the country, going overseas, and then the pollution coming this way. In my mind, the Republicans are all for all that because it's business, it's economy, it's money. And to me, there's more important things than profit. In a nutshell, there's a lot more to it. But
Sure. And you're seeing me through a grid that is, in some ways, and with no disrespect, somewhat prejudiced and
well,
bigoted.
that's why I was going to ask
And
you that. So you could declare yourself.
Because-
What makes you a Republican?
And this is why I say I was supportive of the port of the Boardman project and the moving coal through the state. I have no problem with that. Coal is a natural substance. It's gluten free. It's not genetically modified.
So strict.
Bring it through. You know, and I liked the jobs. I do like the jobs. But as you say, we have a responsibility to the planet as stewards. Now, I was a pastor for a number of years, and I don't. I'm a recovering pastor and a
Good luck with that.
recovering musician as well.
I'm a recovering Catholic.
But and believe me, my faith is very strong. I'm just not doing that vocationally. But,
Sure.
but we have a responsibility to be as stewards of the planet, and it would be foolhardy on a number of levels to allow or cause pollution, because in the first place, what needs to be stewarded from a government perspective is a sustainable economy and a sustainable environment. But we can't just simply step in and place restrictions that are literally choking off family wage jobs. Oregon has an amazing wealth of natural and human resources, and we should be well stewarded in a sustainable way, one of the best economies in the nation. And we have a perpetually sluggish economy, and it takes a lot of work to foul up a state as rich as Oregon, and yet somehow we've managed to do it. And we've had the wrong kind of leadership for too many years. And I think we need to utilize our resources in a sustainable way that protects the environment over time, and it's in business's best interest too to not, as you say, have mining tailings going down into, because that's not a sustainable situation. It's in business's best interest too. And you bring up a very important point. You say that the Republicans a lot of times blame government. It's really big business. The problem that you've brought out is free market capitalism has my support. Free people making free decisions about how they're going to enter into voluntary exchange with each other. Absolutely, that's what liberty is all about. The problem that you outline is one that I think every Republican, every Democrat should be against, and that's crony capitalism, where big business and big government get together and squeeze out those little competitors who've got the better ideas. That's the problem. Crony capitalism is not supportive of freedom. And I would agree with you. I think every Republican should be opposed to crony capitalism.
That's what Mussolini called fascism.
And we just had the report come out today. I don't know the details, but Governor Kitzhaber is our first lady, and this came out in the Willamette Week today. Again, it's the appearance of crony capitalism. The firms that she's doing consulting for are receiving favors in the green industry, in the green energy industry. And again, I don't want to get into the details of that without having read the story, but it's an example of what I'm talking about, where you've got government and an industry that get together, and the people are harmed by that. So I'm in agreement with you on that. So now what do I need to do to earn your vote without changing my values?
Without changing your values? Well, the line where what makes sustainable and what is not sustainable is not a solid line.
We can have that discussion, and it's going to be on a case-by-case basis.
Right.
And that's an important point, because there's a tendency in government, whether I'm on a school board or a U.S. senator, there's a tendency to believe that because we passed a policy or passed a bill, we solved a problem. And then we move on. But as you know, in real life, every solution brings its own new set of problems.
Right.
Usually more than it's solved.
And every government solution a lot of times creates problems that nobody anticipated. And so it's very important to, as you mentioned that line, it's very important to constantly be revisiting and saying, how are we doing here? What adjustments need to be made? How do we deal with this? You pass a law, and now there are always unintended consequences to that law that have to be revisited. And so I think that line is a valid point of discussion. But ultimately, the purpose of bureaucracy is to facilitate commerce, not prevent it. And we are killing jobs in the state of Oregon because of a prevention mentality that basically says if anything might have any harm anytime, any place, we therefore can't do it. And I think there's more intelligent ways to approach these situations, and to attract business. Our tax code doesn't attract business.
Well, what you say is true, but you're talking about tax codes or the bureaucracy putting up roadblocks to business. But at the same time, even though it may be doing that, turn around and look at it from the standpoint of corporate welfare. When you get Exxon and these companies there, they're making billions of dollars a year in profits, but they're getting corporate welfare. They're getting tax subsidies, and so that is a really good example of crony capitalism to me, where these folks are these large corporations are making millions of dollars, billions of dollars, and they're not paying the proper taxes, and of course maybe some what do you call it, whatever you were calling there, things are being put in the way of the everyday small businessman, but at the same time this other is going on with the large corporations receiving the corporate welfare, and whether they're factory farms that are making, what was it? Tyson, I believe, was getting a large amount of money. And to me, that is every bit as big of a problem, if not more of a problem.
To some extent, we're wandering far afield from what I would be able to be involved
well, of course,
with
it gives an idea of
state representative
your
in the state of Oregon.
perspective.
But as we talk about the government's involvement in these things, it's important to recognize that this is a partnership that has to occur. Government is a contextual, it's like a referee in the economy, not a player, should be a referee, make sure the rules are being followed. And so that's all I have to say about that, I guess.
Well, we did wander far afield, but at the same time, you're going to be down in Salem, and you're going to be perhaps bringing laws. I won't say regulations. You'll be bringing laws forward. Or what do you intend to do in Salem?
Well,
do you have anything, any work you have in mind that you want to do?
First of all, some good common sense tax relief for for seniors and working families and small business. That's going to be important, because the small businesses have got to be able to grow and function. As I said, we've got this kind of whack-a-mole system right now, where if you want to expand or grow your business, there's a whole host of bureaucracies to say you got to do it this way, this way, this way. Oh no, not too much. And we've got to have growth. We've got to have sustainable economic growth in this state. And right now, we have a three-tiered income tax system where the first little bit of money you earn is taxed at this rate, and then as the whack-a-mole thing is you stick your head a little higher, oh, your rate just went up, and pretty soon most everybody ends up at about the 9% rate. As you were talking about the corporate welfare, a lot of that is loopholes. There's individual welfare too, in terms of like the mortgage interest deduction is a loophole essentially. That
capital gains deduction, I think, is another one.
Those are essential loopholes that most people approve and enjoy. I like the concept, and I have to see the details, but I like the concept of lower rates and fewer loopholes. Because what happens is that
benefit a larger amount of people.
Because a lot of times high tax rates invite corruption. As you get a high tax rate, as you recall, there was a point at which the top marginal rate was 90% in the United States.
I can remember that.
And of course, nobody's going to pay 90% of their income in taxes. What they did was the government said 90% income tax rate. You want to pay less? Come see us. And it invited corruption, where people would say, okay, how about if I spend my money this way, or how about if I do this? And so all these loopholes got built in, because nobody's going to pay 90% of their income in taxes. Okay. They're going to find a way to get with that, and those high rates, I believe, invite corruption, invite the crony capitalism that we spoke of. Whereas if we look at lower rates and fewer loopholes, close those loopholes, where it's just a predictably lower rate, close the loopholes, and let's unleash the entrepreneurs and the people who know how to run an economy. Because the best economic plans in this state are not going to come from rooms filled with smart people in Salem or Washington, D.C. They're going to come from the garages and the kitchen tables of bright entrepreneurs who are sitting on some really good ideas right now, but just don't feel like they have the freedom to advance it.
So you want to clear the way for those?
I want to clear the brush, move government guardrails.
At least in Oregon.
Well, that's where I'm running.
Because
we have the opportunity to have one of the best economies in the nation right here.
Why is that? What in particular?
Because of the natural and human resources. The people, I look at our students. I'm on a school board. Our students are exceptional, and they deserve an exceptional education, and they're not getting it right now.
Well, we hear that the education system in this whole country is letting everybody down.
Exactly. And that parent who has a child and wants the very best for them, I believe they need more choices, and they need an expanding buffet of choices. We're in the 21st century now, and we've got two things that need to happen with education. One is we have a system right now of public education that needs to be funded adequately and sustainably. We've got to get off of this merry-go-round. That's a top priority for state spending, is the Oregon public school system. But this system is an agricultural/industrial model of educating children. We're off for 3 months in the summer, because that's when the harvest takes place. That doesn't impact most of our families. We're out at 3 in the afternoon because you got to get the chores done before sundown. That doesn't impact most of our families. That said, we've got to fund this system, because those kids have to go to school tomorrow morning. We've got to make sure this system is funded. But somewhere out here, there has to be a shelf life to this. We're not an agricultural or industrial economy anymore. And we need options for families. I'd love to see options like a 3-day-a-week option that works with working families' work schedules. High school kids, and this is a stream of consciousness here, but high school kids, we know that they wake up in the morning and they're not awake. The biology is pretty clear. A high school kid really isn't functioning well till about 11 in the morning. Why do we not have noon to 6 options for our high school kids? And so I would like to see not only some entrepreneurial initiatives in education where we can begin to explore some new ways of doing things with existing and emerging technologies. We need to wipe the whiteboard clean over here and say, okay, we've got to fund this system, but over here, let's talk about this 21st century kid. We need to educate this kid in a way to teach him how to educate himself, because he's got to be on a very organic and dynamic learning curve for the rest of his life. With the way technology is emerging, we can't, if we teach knowledge alone, we're not going to be serving our kids. We've got to teach them how to acquire knowledge on an ongoing basis.
How would this happen? Is this going to happen the way you're going to present it to people that run the classroom and say, here's what you need to?
No, I think it's the opposite. Because right now I think our teachers have too many restrictions placed on them. By the time you get mandates from Salem, mandates from Washington, D.C., many of which don't benefit Trevor in the 2nd grade at Hollydale Elementary, you know.
They benefit the money that's coming in.
Well, so you got money being spent, but it's not really benefiting the student. And then you've got teachers union contracts that restrict both administration and teachers. And that teacher in the classroom often, I think, feels very shackled, not only by inadequate funding where they've got, 38 first graders. I don't know how anybody does that. Maybe in a high school setting you can begin to work toward those larger classes. But, well, we got to focus on our first 3 years.
We've interviewed teachers before on different programs and during the union problems, and
Sure.
boy, that's their biggest gripe is the size of the classroom.
Well, yeah, and again, a lot of it depends on the grade level. Obviously,
they were younger.
You know, if you went to college, you remember classes with 300 people all in an auditorium. At some point, we do learn how to manage our own education by sitting in a room full with 300 students. So. At the higher levels, there's no problem with beginning to hand that responsibility off to that student and say, you're responsible now to learn this. But a lot of I'd like to see our efforts weighted in the first 3 years, because if we can get a child engaged as a reader, if they can come out of the 3rd grade as a proficient reader,
wow,
we've addressed our 2 biggest problems in Oregon right now. We've got the 49th, we're number 49 in graduation rate right now. I mean, yay, we beat Mississippi. I think it was
that's a pretty low bar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so our graduation rates, but you can't just look at that, because graduation rate is an output measure. And you can't say, okay, well, let's fix that. No, you've got to look at these input pieces. And I think the biggest single input is 3rd grade reading. And we need to weight our efforts over here for these kids, because the other problem we have is the low graduation rate, and we have one of the highest absenteeism rates among our students.
Yeah,
and the reason is, I think a large reason is they're just not engaged.
You can't engage if you can't read.
If we can get these kids engaged in years, by the 3rd grade, a lot of these other problems begin to work themselves out. And I'm not saying it's magic, and I'm not saying there needs to be a lot of work after the 3rd grade, but and that's why I say that's within the current system. Over here, I think there's ideas that we've not even heard of yet, and I don't think those ideas are, again, same thing as with the economy. The ideas are not going to come out of rooms filled with certified smart people sitting in Salem. The ideas are going to come out of gifted educators who are sitting there going, I know I can do this. I know what this kid needs, because do you have children?
They're well grown up, though.
Okay, well, second only to you, that teacher in the classroom knows your child probably as well as anyone. And very often, those gifted educators know, I know exactly what this kid needs. I just don't have the bandwidth to do it. I've got union contracts and administration rules, and I've got mandates from Salem, and I've got this, and I've got this, and I've got this, and I can't do for your child what I know needs to be done, because I don't have the time and I don't have the resources. And I want our teachers to have those resources, and so I want entrepreneurial stuff going on out here as we wipe the whiteboard clean and say, how do we educate a child for the 21st century? Entrepreneurial activity out here that gets new ideas. But in the classroom, we need to see some entrepreneurial freedoms for our teachers. where they can begin to, within good context and structure, do what they know is needed for those students. Because our teachers are gifted. They're gifted educators. I'm only speaking for the Gresham-Barlow School District. We have the best district in the state of Oregon. Of course, I'm a little biased there, but
A little bit.
What did No Child Left Behind, did that create problems?
well, yeah.
That's
Again,
exactly what I was going to bring up next.
that was a
Really?
you know that
Yeah.
was a, and again, I'm no expert on No Child Left Behind, and I appreciate you saying it out and not using the acronyms of NCLB. So
Oh, that's what that's for.
that's what
Okay.
that stands for. Yeah.
All right.
No child left a dime, I've heard.
Yeah. Well, but it was a very well-intentioned program from Washington D.C. But and I love have all respect for George W. Bush, for President Barack Obama, for all the people back in Washington D.C. But very few of them have ever been to Gresham. They don't
One
know.
size does not fit all.
They don't know our people. They don't. They don't know our culture. They don't know our town,
Right.
and they certainly don't know Trevor.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the best solutions. Well, let's talk about your house. The best solutions for problems at your house are probably going to come from the people in your house, not
yeah.
from people who have never met you. And if you just back that out, the best solutions to our local problems are generally going to rest with the people who are closest to the problem. They're going to have the best understanding of the problem and the best understanding of the solutions. One of our problems with state government has been this notion that from Salem, we can solve problems for people in the Albina neighborhood, or we can solve problems for people in Pendleton or Burns or Medford. Well,
I don't know.
you don't know the problem well enough to solve it.
Sure. I think that's happened. That's a lot of what happened to the USSR was everything had to come from Moscow.
Sure.
And the country just, just locked up. It couldn't
well,
move.
It does. Because it's important to note that government is necessary and it's appropriate. And very often it is the answer to some specific things. But government, by its nature, can't really be efficient. Now, one of the things I'm running on is I want government. I don't use the phrase small government or even limited government so much as I use focused government. Government needs to focus. And, we're the parents, government's the child. We've written a set of chores called the Constitution, and we provide an allowance to get the job done. That's the role that we have. Government's not our mom and dad. We're government's mom and dad.
The nanny state.
Exactly. And so, given that, I want government to be focused on doing its essential services in a way that's effective and efficient. And government has three core functions, I believe, in the state of Oregon. And it's not the only functions, but government has three core functions: public safety, and public education, and public infrastructure. Good government's boring. I understand that doing those three things and doing them well isn't going to get a lot of sizzle and headlines, but that's where government needs to be focused: public safety, public education, and public infrastructure. And the three things do overlap.
Oh, it's defense, but that's.
Of course, well, I'm talking state of
yeah,
Oregon.
yeah.
I'm not running for president. So.
Well, the state is a certain. That's what the National Guard was supposed to be for.
Yeah.
But it didn't work out that way once we got overseas there. But I understand what you're saying with education, and it's probably the most important thing on the playing field. And to my biggest problem with our education system is it encourages primarily career, and it doesn't really try to teach people to think for themselves. And as what you were saying, teaching them to read and teaching them to want to read and teaching them to be able to think critically, to me, is probably worth more than any of the
I think
the
it's
things
important
that they're
to note
trying to
that
give.
We're not doing that right now. I just think we can do more of it and do it better. There's been a real push for a lot of years for the public school system to be a feeder program for the university system. In other words, everybody needs to go to college. That's not necessarily true. We are learning that, irrespective of emerging technologies, we're still going to need people who know how to put a couple pipes together and make them.
And weld them together.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to need some very basic skills, and we have a lot of professions right now. I've been involved in the automotive sales industry for some time. Business development manager in the auto sales industry since I left the pastorate. I've been just involved in raising my family so I could live in one place. And in the automotive industry, we have a number of technicians who work on cars, who have been working for 25 and 30 years, and we don't really have a good generation coming up to replace those men and women. And so
why is that?
because the emphasis within public education has been toward
College.
university,
Okay.
and that's a reason. But I think we need to broaden our scope. Is university important? Absolutely. But is it the only important? Absolutely not. And we need to expand our career and technical and vocational training in a way that we've really abandoned over a long period of time, and I think it's time we need to return to that, but not at the expense of the university track. It needs to be, it's not either or, it's both and.
Well, there was some high school student a while back that he's a multimillionaire now because he came up with some kind of new test for diabetes or something like that. It was all over the news, and you don't necessarily have to. I'm sure he wasn't a college student.
Well,
individual people can develop entrepreneurship, like you said. There are so many ways, new energy sources and ways of using the energy we have. There's so many different ways to go.
Exactly.
The word is sustainable.
Exactly, and that's what our economy needs, and our education system. As I look at our current system, we haven't had sustainable funding. We've had taken real cuts in recent years, where in our district we had to cut days, and we had to cut teachers. So really, the only way a district can cut spending is to cut days or teachers. There's no, no magic number, really. Administration in our district is quite lean. We run a pretty tight financial ship, but our burn rate in the Gresham-Barlow district is about $1 million every 3 days. So every 3 days, school's in session. It's $1 million. $1 million, and I'm not begrudging that, but we need to look at the investment we're making right now. If you start in kindergarten and we educate you for 12 and a half years, a half-day kindergarten, and that's going to full day, and then so 12 to 13 years of public school education, that is easily a $100,000 education that you've just received. And you have to ask yourself, what kind of output should we get for a $100,000 investment in a student? Because we're handing them a $100,000 diploma. It's a very expensive diploma. And I've always sometimes thought we've done our students, even the public, a disservice by talking about free public education. It's not free. Hard-working men and women sweat and bleed to make sure that those dollars are there. And I'd like to see our families and our students start to really see the value of what that diploma that's being handed to them. That represents a big sacrifice on the part of society.
It occurs to me that they're going to see it real quick when they start borrowing money to go to college.
Well, exactly.
And then it's on them.
Well, exactly.
And they come out of college $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 in debt.
Well, they certainly want to leverage that $100,000 to do something more than just pump gas. No offense to, that's honorable work, but
it's entry level.
It is, and it needs to be the first rung on the ladder.
That's what I did when I was young.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with it. $1.50 an hour. $8 a day take home.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe anybody can live on that, but you can't live on minimum wage now. I mean, a person was at $9 an hour now, which is
it's a different deal.
It's about 10, yeah. And Oregon already has the second highest minimum wage in the nation.
Sure.
And it's pegged to inflation. So I don't.
But doing that right, in this state, I would think. Because that was a legislation that came out of Salem. That wasn't a citizens' initiative or anything.
No.
Right?
I don't recall.
I would think that it was. But that's $2 more an hour, I think, than it is nationally.
Well, the thing I want to know is, have I convinced you to vote for me yet?
Well, unfortunately, I don't know anything about your opponent. I'd have to find out a little bit about her. You said her.
You don't need to know. It's an open seat. Just vote for me. You're not even in my
I don't live in Jackson.
Are there two Democrats against you?
No, there were
that
two,
was for the
two in the primary,
And
and then
what
one
happened?
advanced.
So now one is there.
Yeah, exactly. And so two people running for an open seat that Greg Matthews held for the last 6 years. Prior to that, we've had Republicans hold this seat. John Lim held the seat for a while. Farther back, Ron Sunseri held the seat, and so East County is a very pragmatic part of the world. You know? And
Well, you know, I've had Republicans that I have a lot of agreement with in the past. I was kind of taken with Huntsman when he was running. Unfortunately, there was a lot of things about him I didn't like, but there was a lot of things I did like about him, and they still interview him once in a while. He makes a lot of sense.
there were apparently a lot of things that a lot of Republicans didn't like about him. He didn't get too far, but
No, well, he wasn't the, you know, you had to be a insider.
yeah.
I like use your terminology. You had to be a Mitt Romney or someone that had the inside on the value issues and the
Well,
economy issues.
I'm enjoying running at a local level. Let's put it that way. I very much enjoy the local race.
Well, it's a whole lot more touchy-feely. I mean, you can get out there and you can deal with your constituency on these smaller levels, but when you're having to try to convince the whole country,
Sure.
you know, how much can you touch each one of them? You know, hug a baby and, you know, smoke a cigar, and, you know, what was it that Hillary was doing, drinking a beer somewhere? I mean, you know, to try to appear like you're one of them when you're not.
Yeah, and that's where I have to give full disclosure. Personally, I've never tasted beer.
Never tasted
That's my big confession here. Never tasted it. So,
alcohol at all or beer?
Not at all. No alcohol. I'm 57 years old, still haven't had my first drink.
My
So
gosh.
you know.
Oh,
Where were you when
that's
you were
all right.
young? Because I think, well, you know, that's the big thing, is to go out with the boys and have a few beers when you're
Yeah,
a
it just-
teenager.
You know, as well as I said, my path kind of never led there. and-
Never went there.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Not prudish about it, not judgmental. It's just kind of where I ended up. So.
Well, you know, I was, heck, we're down to what, 7 minutes, but I was wanting to ask you a couple questions about some of these initiatives coming up, measures. And since you mentioned no alcohol, what's your standing on legalizing marijuana?
As a general rule, I'm probably going to vote no on that one. It's several reasons, not the least of which is I would really like to see Colorado and Washington beta test this for 5 years to work out the bugs. There's some issues that I have some concerns about with that. One is what tools are there for our law enforcement to accurately and prosecutably detect impairment?
I mean, like for driving. you mean?
Exactly.
I think they're doing that up north.
Yeah, what tools are there, and to what extent are they tested? Another, I think, very serious issue with that is the plethora of products that have cannabis in them. So there's the labeling and packaging and marketing issues. Like there's a product called Pot Tarts that looks a lot,
I haven't heard of that one yet.
and looks like something that a child would enjoy eating. And we've had,
Oh, yes.
you know, there's been reports out of Colorado, an increase of children in emergency rooms. So I would prefer to see them beta test this. Now, you know, as noted, at my house, the law remains. There will be no pot and no alcohol at my home. So, you know, so you don't want necessarily me imposing my laws on the rest of the world, because I think we'd have revolt if you know, so self-government means at my house, that's the law. But, you know, ultimately, the people, all of these ballot initiatives have been entrusted to the people. And,
They came from the people.
right?
Yeah.
And I do trust it. They've elected me twice to the school board, so I can't, you know, I can't fault the voters too much. You know,
They're pretty savvy, huh?
yeah, but so the legislature, as an elected official, I will be duty bound to uphold the will of the people and to support the will of the people. But I have some concerns about that one, and I think with that one, if it does pass, there's going to be a lot of legislative looking at making sure we're quantifying, again, a safe context within which people can exercise their liberties. And
Well, I
so
think
that one concerns me a lot. I think I do still believe it's a gateway drug, and so at a personal level, I'm opposing it. But as I said, it's been entrusted to the people, and I would be duty bound to uphold
right, and
their
you
decision.
may be under the gun, literally on that one, if you're elected.
Sure.
When you're elected.
That's the job.
So.
When? Better word than it.
Yeah.
I like his word.
Yeah.
When.
So how about the labeling?
You know, I'm concerned about that one too, because of the. I think it's going to put Oregon farmers at a competitive disadvantage. The crafting of the law, I think it's one of those that's filled with some very clear unintended consequences. I understand the goal is labeling. I'm concerned about the fact that it could put Oregon farmers at a competitive disadvantage at a time when our economy can ill afford it. I would like to see a whole different way of it being put together, because the way it's set up right now, I don't think it accomplishes what it sets out to do.
Well, that's what the no people are saying, but I don't really see how it's affecting the farmers. They say it will, and you say it will, but I don't see how.
Well, I mean, and when you got this whole industry, food production industry, that if you have an Oregon only rule, it does create a problem. This would be better addressed, I believe, and Senator Merkley's on this at the national level. But
he's tried, yeah. He's worked on it.
When you start piecemealing something like this, I think you're going to create some real problems for the economy.
But then the power of Monsanto and DuPont and all these companies are making it necessary that it has to be done on a local level.
What power does Monsanto have over you?
Oh, no, I have nothing to do with this. All I have is my vote. What they're doing is what I'm saying. What the power they have is they go to the state legislatures and they go to the federal government and they keep any of this from happening there.
But how does that impact you?
It impacts me because I don't have the stuff that I eat labeled. That's how it impacts me.
You probably have a pretty good idea of what you eat, though.
Yeah, I know, but I know that 90% of anything that has soy or corn in it is GMO. I know that.
Okay, well, so
and that's not labeled.
You've exercised your liberties quite well, I think.
And a lot of people have.
Sometimes I think these initiatives that will come forth are sometimes solutions in search of a problem. And sometimes the solution brings more problems than the problem they're trying to solve.
Interesting you frame it that way, because I know a lot of people that are anti-GMO saying that GMOs are a solution in search of a problem.
Understood.
That's interesting.
Understood.
That's interesting.
We kind of reached the
we went
end
quick,
here,
didn't
and
we?
let's go over what you're running for,
right?
Your name, and
got a recap there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm Dan Christensen. I am running for state representative in Oregon's House District 50. That's Gresham in the East County, and I fully intend to go to Salem and work hard to govern the government on behalf of the people who elect me. And I fully intend to stay very much in touch with the people who elect me so that I understand how to represent them effectively and capably. And I want your vote.
Right.
Even though I can't vote for it. Well, hey, if you're on the ballot when I get it, I'll vote for you.
Okay, if I'm on your ballot, I've got your commitment. That's all I'm asking.
That's an easy one for both of us.
I like that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to a schedule of the playtimes, if we could. Will that work?
Well, we also got a video that we're going to play that was the...
well, that would be after.
Yeah, we can do that, but they won't know what it is. Well, I guess it's too late, so they'll have to figure it out when it comes on.
You are watching the Independent Producers Organization program. This program replays on these channels, at these times, and on these days. Write it down and tell your friends.
All right, we're back.
Right.
We're going to, after a little 12-minute clip, we're going to kind of go in and start going over some of these measures from what little bit we know about them, and maybe give some people some ideas on where to go to find out more information. We have a list of all the measures here. And but first I want to play a little clip because I shot it last night. I recorded it last night. It was a 50th anniversary of the Wilderness Act that has allowed us to have such great, wonderful wilderness in this state and all over the country. And it was headed by Blumenauer, and it had some speakers from different organizations like Waldo Lake and the Kalmiopsis. And but this is just the introduction, a 12-minute introduction by Blumenauer, and he talked a lot about how wonderful Oregon is, and our wilderness areas, and how we need to provide more access to folks. I think the 5% of our state is protected in wilderness. It's less than Washington, less than Idaho. There's no excuse for that at all. So let's go to that, and we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about the upcoming measures.
Of the Land and Water Conservation Fund. It's kind of worth considering what America would look like without these historic pieces of legislation. And without the advocacy of many in this room, many of Oregon's most wild places, scenic vistas, and important wildlife habitat would have been lost to development and chainsaws. I appreciate the leadership that my friend Senator Ron Wyden has done in terms of his concern about Oregon special places. He was not able to be with us this afternoon, but in a moment we will turn, I think Mary has some communication from the Senator, and we appreciate, Mary, your being here and sharing some of Ron's thoughts with us. The partnership within the delegation is critical. 6 years ago, the Omnibus Public Lands Bill of 2009, basically the delegation gelled. Together, we were able to expand the Mount Hood and Columbia River Gorge Wilderness, add Copper Salmon, Soda Mountain, Spring Basin, and the Badlands across the state. We protected 90 miles of new wild and scenic rivers. And there are many organizations here represented this evening who were a part of that, and I think we ought to just give a special shout out here to Oregon Wild, formerly the Oregon Natural Resources Council, celebrating 40 years in protecting public lands in Oregon, for Oregon Wild. Wilderness battles were a major point of definition in Oregon's political landscape for generations. The notion that forests were to log, rivers were to tame, to dam, and channelize were part of that pioneer ethic earlier in our history. There were efforts to recalibrate by protecting Oregon's beaches, dealing with a more balanced approach to forestry, protecting watersheds and scenic vistas, were all sort of looming in the background. Were we going to dam Hell's Canyon and build major highways not just along, but through beaches, marshes, and estuaries? And then, of course, the salmon, who would receive priority access to the precious resource and iconic Northwest species. It was fun for me 18 years ago, when I was first elected to Congress, to be able to work with Senator Hatfield in those first few months to protect the beautiful and embattled Opal Creek. We've, over those years, staved off assaults to the Columbia River Gorge in the 1990s. Remember, the commission itself was under assault to strip it of its authority. And it was interesting watching people come together to make clear that the gorge didn't just belong to immediate landowners and neighbors. It was a national treasure that people throughout the Northwest and America had a stake in preserving. And over these years in Congress, it's been some of my most vivid memories are being a part of the efforts to understand and protect the natural landscape. Flying slowly over the Klamath River Basin, The work that we did with the Mount Hood summits and the little hike that Greg Walden and I had in 2005 as we were defining legislation and bringing together people on that piece. Just this spring, I'm embarrassed to admit that I'd never been to the Zumwalt Prairie, and having a chance to walk in those lush grasslands was really spectacular. We're entering a pretty critical stage at this point. We are hamstrung by threats to the deserts and mountains, not just of commercial activities like mining and reckless treatment of forest health, in some cases by the federal government's own behavior. We also face the menace of climate change, affecting biodiversity from the oceans off our coasts to the high mountain desert and beyond. It's kind of chilling. I read that report this week, half these species becoming extinct as a result of human activity with climate change, if you're one of those people who believes the scientists. The continued challenges for shifting marine populations, large mammals like the walrus and polar bears who no longer have the ice flows that are so critical to their being able to thrive. The ground is literally shifting under our feet and disappearing under the feet of some of our fellow species. And then there's another strain in the context here of climate change that we're going to be facing in the Pacific Northwest. These articles that you've seen just in the last couple weeks about climate refugees, we're expecting several 100,000 people in the near future, just in the normal course of things. The people who gravitate towards Portlandia or who love the retirement areas of the state and our own natural population growth. It's nice to see some of our kids come home and settle down and have kids. But there's going to be another wave. And it's not tens of thousands, it's hundreds of thousands of people who are going to be here because of what's happening to the rest of the country. And that's going to place some real strains in terms of the people coming here. Are they going to share the Oregon environmental ethic, which in the main has defined who we are for a number of years? It's not just numbers, it's attitudes and the strains that are going to be associated with that. I'm personally intrigued with another climate change, and that's the political climate. There's a sort of a natural ebb and flow. Things are a little grim in some parts of the country. I've spent some time trying to get you a better Congress and being engaged in some of those activities. This is a challenging political environment. And that challenged political environment was one of our big obstacles for years, trying to move things through. And it was only when we had sort of a wave election in 2009, somebody willing to sign the legislation, and we had majorities, that we were able to get those 2 million acres of wilderness. Well, I'm firmly of the opinion that the tide is going to be coming in over the next 2 or 3 years. We need to be ready for it. We need to be ready to take advantage of the changes and the shifts. And in fact, I think the conversation that we're going to have this evening, being able to broaden it, to engage more people, to think about what our goals and values are, our dreams for the future, is going to be part of that recalibration. I think this is an area that can bring people together much more than it will divide people. And I want to be ready when that ice dam breaks, when things start moving. Just as the Mount Hood wilderness legislation was bottled up, I think we're going to see the change coming here. It's really hard sometimes to be sanguine about taking the time to lay the foundation to do this sort of work when you don't think it's going to happen immediately. But when we are talking about millions of acres in our state, and that it's going to be complex. It is going to be not without controversy. There will be trade-offs and compromises. It's important, I think, to start now and do it right. Over the next hour, what we'd like you to do with us is to just assume that that logjam has been broken. What are the big pieces that we need to move first to protect? Where are the forces at work with which we need to stand shoulder to shoulder to make sure that this next adventure happens? What are the individual pieces that are going to engage our friends, our families, our neighbors to be able to fight for their priorities? Tonight, you'll have an opportunity following introductory remarks from a couple of wilderness veterans you may recognize, Andy Kerr and Ken Waite. We're going to hear some specifics about Oregon's best opportunities for wilderness in the coming years, some big picture items. Brent Fenty from the Oregon Natural Desert Association describing the Oahe Canyon lands. Bridget Callahan from Oregon Wild will talk about the majestic Crater Lake and some unfinished business around Mount Hood. Joseph Vale and Zach Collier will give voice to the mysterious Kalmiopsis, and Rhett Lawrence from the Sierra Club will profile our beloved Waldo Lake. It's not an exhaustive list, but each of these areas are unique in the values they provide to the public in terms of recreation, water supply, habitat, and a place to refresh the soul. It's at once sobering and breathtaking to consider what's transpired over the last 50 years since President Johnson first signed the original Wilderness Act. There were 54 areas established in 1964. Now there are 758 in 44 states. 110 million acres sounds impressive, but it's only 5% of the American landmass. I think most of us feel that there are more we can do, particularly since so much of the American landmass still belongs to the American people. There are currently more than 30 proposed wilderness areas pending in this Congress. And I guess what I'd like to do in leaving this evening is to think about what we would be celebrating for the 75th anniversary of the Wilderness Act. What will Oregon look like 25 years from now if we do our jobs right?
You are watching the Independent Producers Organization program. This program replays on these channels, at these times, and on these days. Write it down and tell your friends.
Okay. There. Oh my.
All right, oh, look at that. It's another one of Bill Olson's photographs. He does beautiful work out on the Columbia River.
Wow.
I don't even know what that is, actually. All right. But anyway.
Yeah.
Richard was wanting to, well, she had a good idea. He brought some printed up sheets of the different,
Yeah. Oh,
I am plugged in on it, yeah, the different measures. So what did you want to talk about first?
well, first I wanted to say I got these came out in 17 pages. My saving the ecology or whatever, I print on both sides.
It's a good idea.
Okay, and 17 pages, and I went to Multnomah County elections and finally found where you can print this stuff out. So if you want to look at it early so you can talk about it, that's the place to go. Okay, now I don't know, did you want to start out with the heavy one first? Or?
Oh yeah, let's start with the heavy one.
Okay, that of course is Monsanto, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you know, when I first heard about this, and it was Monsanto had been, I'm trying to think of the word, just suing farmers if some of their stuff they're genetically modified, blew over on Monsanto's property. If that happened, Monsanto would sue them, and then the farmer would try to fight back and sue, and then he would just get smashed.
That's what happened in Canada. Yeah, a guy named Percy. Yeah, Monsanto sued a farmer because the farmer's crops were pollinated by the genetic modified crops that they had. I don't remember what it was, and I think they won. Monsanto won.
Yeah, I mean, destroying a farmer, or plural, by doing that, it just really gets me. I think of Monsanto as a total bully. You know, I really do. You know, I'm for business, doing all that, but that's not the way. I mean, does this company not have any compassion? That's what I'm thinking.
Say, well, that's why we have the Millions Against Monsanto marches once or twice a year, because they've angered so many people worldwide.
Yeah.
And you know, there's been reports of them going into areas. I think it was Monsanto. It might have been Coca-Cola. Now that I think about it, but they went into India and took over the water. But I know that, and so the people had to buy the water from them. That was Coca-Cola. But actually, in India, they go into places and they sell them all a bill of goods for the seeds and so they can grow these genetically modified crops, and they don't. You know, after 1 or 2 years, they're dead broke, and they end up eating and drinking the pesticides and dying. There's been thousands of deaths to suicide, and you know, it just keeps happening because they keep getting sold this bill of goods, and these folks.
It's incredible.
Yeah, and you know, of course the genetically engineering labeling. You know, I mean, you can't say it has nothing to do with Monsanto because they're the major genetically engineered GMO corporation. But it's specifically, you know, it isn't aimed at any one corporation. It's aimed at anybody, any product that, well, I guess any, but most products that have GMOs have to be labeled. And I know our guest earlier, he didn't think that was a good idea the way it was being done. He said that, you know, why don't we, what exactly did?
Well, there are two sides, and when you label, I don't care what they say, it costs money. It costs money. Does it really have to be that important, or can't people just kind of say, come get a bulletin, a newspaper or something that will say, okay, don't buy this, don't buy that, because it's got.
Well, nobody's telling anybody not to buy it. They're just telling them what's in it.
Yeah, right. Well,
you know, and like I was telling the guest, 90% of your GMO or your corn and your soy is genetically modified because they take it all and they mix it together, whether it's genetically modified or not, and they don't keep it separate. So you know, all these healthy people that are trying to eat healthy and not eat meat, that are eating all these different soy products, tofu and such. You don't know if it's got it in it, and it'd be nice to know that these people are trying to eat healthy. And maybe the choices they're making aren't as healthy as they think they are. And this labeling would take care of that. And if it costs a few cents, so be it. If it's the right thing to do, then we're all going to have to bear the brunt of it. You know, look at what goes on with gas. It's down to like $3.23 a gallon. A while back, it was $4 a gallon, and people pay it, and people continue on with their lives. And you're talking 80 cents a gallon there, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that and you look at the Consumers Union, which is a very scientific body, and they have looked at it, and you've seen the ads on TV. They show all the countries that demand labeling, and they say it didn't cost any more money for them to label it, and so why should it cost anything here?
I don't believe that. I mean, I don't care if it does cost, but I don't see anybody can say to label, and you have to pay someone to label. It's going to cost a little.
Well, once they make up the labels and they add it to it, they can run the label off 1 billion times.
Yeah, it's all part of the main label.
Right. Once they change it over to include that, the genetically engineered companies, they've even come out and said, well, we don't want to put it on there because then people won't want to buy it. That's precisely right. They think that too. So, they're trying to fight it because they think that people will choose not to buy the stuff. No. Well, they should have that choice whether or not to buy it. Not having Monsanto and DuPont and these companies put millions of dollars into these initiatives, coming in from all over the state in order to stop something that the people signed overwhelmingly to get on the ballot. And they go to Salem, they go to the different legislatures in different states, they go to the Washington, D.C., and they're trying to preempt this legislation by making it illegal to do that. Like the animal factory farm companies have gone into I guess they went into Washington, D.C., and they made it illegal for someone to go in there and videotape stuff that's going on that, animal abuse.
Oh,
so
yes.
It's against the law to do that now. It's against the law for people to go across state lines to protest animal abuse. I forget the terminology, but it's the Animal Rights Terrorism Act or something.
Right. Okay.
So it's the same thing. They're trying to preempt what the people have a right to do to protest and to try to make things better. And Monsanto's the king of that. They are the king of that. And the guest had he had a point. He doesn't think that it's going to get in the way of small farmers. You've got people for and against this 92 that are farmers. Mm-hmm. And to me, it just seems like, from what I know of it, the farmers that were against it, they were using terminology and they were using framing the issues in such a way that it seemed to me it was a script that was written for them. It wasn't something that just come out of there off the farm and talking.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong. They could be extremely college educated, and that could be how they usually talk. But it just didn't seem right to me. Mm-hmm. So. That's to me that's an important one because that has long range consequences down the road. So I do have a little video because there was a conference a while back called Justice Begins with Seeds, and I taped recorded various people. One was a group from Hawaii that had been fighting to get control of their food. And because this is basically a issue having control of our food, or the corporate industry having control of our food.
Yeah.
It isn't just labeling, but this is where the battle is starting here. And there was people from Hawaii talking about it, and there was this one woman from Mexico, and her talk was of the struggle for corn. And so if we have that up while we're talking about this particular issue, we'll play that, then we'll move into something else.
Oh, okay. Wow, very good, Jim.
All right. Yeah, I have 3 so far.
Talk about the struggle of corn that we do in Mexico. Yo soy Adelita San Vicente y vengo de una organización que se llama Semillas de Vida y somos parte de la campaña Sin Maíz No Hay País, que estamos llevando adelante esta demanda colectiva contra el maíz transgénico en México.
So Adelita San Vicente, she's part of an NGO called Semillas de Vida, Seeds of Life, and she is also part of a broader campaign that's called Without Corn We Have No Country. This is actually a rhyme in Spanish. And this is a broad scope alliance of peasant organizations, of environmental organizations, of consumer organizations, and she is one of the persons that is heading the demand against the Mexican government in order to overthrow the permits to sow transgenic corn in the country.
Bueno, para nosotros el maíz, como lo dijo Roberto, pues es algo sagrado y México es el centro de origen y de diversificación constante del maíz y por eso pensamos que el maíz es una planta que está en disputa frente a las empresas transnacionales. A pesar de lo que decía nuestra compañera periodista, nosotros estamos peleando por nuestro maíz.
Corn is a sacred, as Roberto, the previous speaker, said, it's a sacred plant in Mexico, and there is a dispute over the who should be able to sow corn, and there's a dispute against transnational companies that are trying to sow transgenic corn in Mexico. That she's going to defer a little bit from Claire, saying that it is a dispute, it is a struggle, it is a war against these companies. So it's, as the PowerPoint presentation says, it's a corn is a grain in dispute in the country.
Y para mí es muy importante dar cuenta de lo que es la agricultura como uno de los grandes inventos de la humanidad, uno de los 3 grandes inventos de la humanidad que tiene una línea del tiempo de más de 10,000 años y que solo en la última fase, desde la Revolución Verde y lo que han llamado la Revolución Tecnológica, han convertido nuestras semillas, que eran un bien común, en una mercancía.
And something that's important to stress here is that agriculture is one of the most important human inventions around the world. It is, along with the use of fire and the use of mechanical strength, something that is a revolutionized human stance in the world. And plant domestication was carried around since 10,000 years or before present, and all the way until the Green Revolution, seeds, which are the basis of agriculture, were a common good, and now they are trying to be transformed into commodities.
Y bueno, México, incluido en Mesoamérica, es uno de los 8 centros de origen que Vavilov determinó en el siglo pasado, donde se originaron pues las plantas que ahí se señalan.
And something that's also noteworthy is that Mexico is one of the 8 worldwide centers of crop origins, and they're highlighted in different colors. These were described by a Russian scholar called Vavilov, who was very important in trying to infer where different crop plants had originated. And in the case of Mexico, I should add that Mexico harbors crop plants that are 15% of what the human population worldwide consumes.
Y aquí está todo lo que México le ha dado al mundo. No solo es el maíz, estamos hablando de del jitomate o tomate, las calabazas, el frijol y el porcentaje que ya Alma decía.
So here's a little image just illustrating the last point. This is 15.4% of the global food system species come from plants domesticated and diversified in Mexico. And I would only add to this image, which is incomplete, it's just a sample, is also the origin of cotton, of the highland cotton that's cultivated in 95% of the world, and that is also a food crop, because we do not realize it, but we actually eat a lot of cotton through oil.
Y para nosotros esta diversidad no existe sola. Esta diversidad está ligada a las grandes culturas, a las familias que en México mantienen esta diversidad. En esta fotografía que es en Chiapas, lo que ustedes ven arriba es un banco de semillas con las semillas que se sembrarán en el siguiente ciclo, y aquí abajo tienen el maíz que ellos van a comer. Toda la familia están trabajando en sembrarlo, en clasificarlo y en mantener esta diversidad.
Something that's also important to stress is that this biological diversity of food crop plants is not kept in a void. It's actually actively sustained by the people that grow them. This is agrobiodiversity that is intrinsically related with the peasants that keep it and proliferate it. And in this picture, what we can see is this is a family, and their seed reservoirs are the ones that are hanging on top of their head. That's the seeds they've selected for the next growing cycle. And then on the lower right side of the picture, you can see that there's corn also on the floor, and that's the corn that's going to be used for making tortillas and for human consumption. And they are actively selecting what they're going to use cycle after cycle.
Y bueno, esto es lo que Roberto muy bien explicaba, que finalmente el maíz para nosotros, se dice que el maíz nos hizo y a la vez nosotros, las mujeres y hombres mesoamericanos, hicimos al maíz. Hay una relación muy directa entre los mexicanos o los mesoamericanos y el maíz.
And as Roberto said in his presentation, it's important to note that in the case of Mexico and Mesoamerica, well, Central America, part of Central America, there's a two-way relationship with corn. It's not only the staple food of Mexico, it's also important and engraved in the symbolic collective. And that's why there's several people that assert that the corn is an invention of ours, yes, but in turn the corn invented us. And this is actually not so much of a metaphor, because the fact of agriculture worldwide, and in the case of Mexico and Central America, the fact of domesticating plants that were so productive and so trustworthy as corn, enabled the construction of really complex civilizations. So this is not just a metaphor, it actually has to do with the way culture was able to be generated in this part of the world.
Y esta es la razón de por qué el maíz fue hecho por los hombres y mujeres mesoamericanos, porque de la planta que vemos a la derecha, que es lo que se conoce como el teocintle, el pariente silvestre más cercano que se ha encontrado, se evolucionó al maíz. Y esto fue gracias al trabajo de selección y mejoramiento de los indígenas que habitaron en Mesoamérica antes de la conquista.
So the domestication of corn actually comes from its wild relative, which is teocinte, which we can see a drawing of it on the left hand of the picture. As you can see, it looks a lot like corn, but if you see the fruit of the teocinte, it is very different from corn. And the process that was able to take teocinte from that particular structure to the ear of corn that we know now was a process that was generated through directed selection by the human populations that lived in the American continent before the European conquest of the continent.
Y que cuando hablamos del maíz, hablamos de una historia de éxito de más de 8,000 años. El maíz es el cultivo que mejor nivel de adaptación tiene a cualquier altura y a cualquier nivel de lluvia. Entonces, eso lo hace ser el cultivo ideal para el cambio climático. Híjole, ya te la...
So this is an ongoing process that's been going on for over 8,000 years, and it's been subject to improvements. And something that's important is that corn is a very adaptable crop. It can grow in different conditions of temperature, climate, altitude, soil, precipitation, and it can be grown from sea level all the way to 3,000 meters above sea level, and it is also very hardy to extreme conditions. Not all the cultivars, but some of them. So it's a very important crop to contend with the impending climate change.
A su vez, el maíz es hoy el cultivo, el cereal, después de considerando los tres principales cereales del mundo, que son trigo, arroz y maíz. El maíz es el cereal más importante en volumen de producción. Como ustedes pueden ver en la gráfica, la tercera es el maíz, su volumen de producción ha crecido mucho en los últimos años.
And also corn is currently the crop that is the most relevant, and it's the most grown in volume worldwide. And we can see in this graphic on the right side of the PowerPoint that we can see 3 different things. Maíz is corn, arroz is rice, and down here is trigo is wheat. So it's actually the volume of corn produced over the years in the last 15 years has increased notably in the case of corn.
Y esto sucede por los múltiples usos que tiene el maíz. Decimos que después del petróleo, el maíz es el cultivo, el producto que está presente en el mayor número de productos, no solo en la alimentación directa, en la alimentación industrial y en otros productos como es el papel, las medicinas y por supuesto los agrocombustibles.
So corn is not only important for direct consumption, but it's actually a really important part of different food derivatives. We can see some of them here. There's some derivatives that are in milk, eggs, meat, soda. So it's all around the food industry, maybe not as corn itself, but as fructose, as other type of products.
En México es muy importante el trabajo que los campesinos y las campesinas hacen continuamente. Cada ciclo productivo están continuamente mejorando el maíz.
And something that we want to stress again is that this process of diversifying corn is an ongoing process. It didn't finish 500 years ago. It's still an impending process. And current peasants, both men and women, especially women, are the ones that are selecting for particular traits that are of relevance for them.
Y todo esto es el proceso que van haciendo los campesinos en México y que es sumamente importante para mantener la diversidad del maíz. Todas estas láminas que fuimos pasando rápidamente son las prácticas que aún se realizan en México y que mantienen esta diversidad del maíz que es sumamente importante.
So the last slide is just a way of showing how current practices of farmer and peasant communities are the ones that are sustaining current genetic diversity in corn.
Y que para nosotros estas prácticas campesinas son las que realmente siguen manteniendo nuestro maíz y son la base de la lucha más importante en la defensa del maíz nativo y contra los transgénicos.
So something that's important also to stress in this talk is that the way farmers manage their seeds, the way they are actively selecting for relevant traits, is something that also needs protection. It's not the corn itself that needs protection, and the whole agricultural system that is enabling this high genetic diversity also needs protection.
Por otra parte, desde las organizaciones como la campaña Sin Maíz No Hay País que les mencionaba, hemos tomado la justicia en nuestras manos.
On this regard, from the campaign we mentioned it at the beginning, Without Corn There's No Country, we have taken the law in our hands. It actually reads law in Spanish there.
And sorry, there's a lot of job here que no se pueda ver bien. But here is the bueno, aquí está la acción colectiva que nosotros interpusimos en el año pasado y gracias a la cual se ha prohibido la siembra de maíz transgénico en México.
So taking law into our hands, last year there was a people's collective demand, which is a particular figure, recent figure in Mexico, that was elevated, and it's going to be elevated to the Supreme Court, probably. And with this collective demand against the sowing of transgenic corn, last year it was granted. It was granted as an action, and right now we have a moratorium in the sowing of transgenic corn in the country since the end of 2013. Thank you.
Esta fue la noticia que dimos en la televisión y que ha circulado por el mundo. La que sigue, si quiere. Y esta es la medida por la cual el juez detuvo la siembra de transgénicos. Sí, aquí en México, aquí en Estados Unidos circuló Hugh Grant como un perdedor por esta.
So this was the demand was the one that obligated the Ministries of Agriculture and Environment in Mexico to immediately stop any activity leading to granting any permit for genetically modified corn in Mexico. And while there was this banner that circulated in the internet, ¿cómo se llama?
Hugh Grant.
Where you can see the CEO of Monsanto, Hugh Grant, well, as a loser, no?
Esta es una acción que hicimos en México en 2009, que es en la gran plaza principal de México que se llama El Zócalo. Con 35 toneladas de maíz hicimos este mapa, mismas toneladas que recogimos, para decir en una reunión del protocolo de Cartagena que no queremos maíz transgénico en México. Y bueno, nos da mucho gusto esta cita del periódico Wall Street que dice pues que no hay un país como el México que haya luchado tanto contra los transgénicos, y pensamos que así vamos a seguir defendiendo a México frente a la invasión de los transgénicos.
And this is just to close the talk. This is just a figure of, it was a sculpture that was made in the main plaza, central plaza of Mexico City, which is the main plaza of the country, which is the Zócalo. And these were 35 tons of corn that were dispersed to generate this image that you can see down there, that the picture appeared in the Wall Street Journal. And 35 tons that were obviously collected and used for something else later on. But we just want to finish with this quote from the Wall Street Journal, that there is no other country in the world opposing so much to the liberation of transgenic corn than Mexico. Thank you.
Okay, we're back. I forgot that was in Spanish with translation, but I think it's important to emphasize the fact that even though this is in Oregon and we're trying to change, label our genetically modified organisms in our food, in some of our food, not all of it, and it didn't pass here a few years ago. It just didn't pass in Washington. It didn't pass in California. It recently did pass in Vermont, and of course Vermont is being sued.
Oh, really?
Yeah, over that. And it just here in Oregon last election in May, genetically modified organisms and farming was completely stopped in Josephine and Jackson County in southern Oregon. The farmers stopped it down there. That's why you see the farmers in these ads for and against being so emphasized, is because the farmers stopped it down there. And I don't remember the dynamics of that, but that was important to them down there because it was interfering with their ability to grow the crops they wanted to grow. And that's happening in Mexico. It's happening in Hawaii. If you've watched the Yes on 92, it shows pictures of the countries that are labeling it. It's much of Europe, much of Japan, and I guess the whole country of Japan actually, and many others. So this is an ongoing battle, and it's not going to end. This isn't going to be the end of it if we pass it. It's just going to be the beginning here in Oregon, and they're going to sue us too as well, and they got the money to do it. And so I just want folks to know that this is going on around the world. It isn't just here.
Monsanto is suing
either Monsanto or a conglomeration, because there's I don't think it was this one, but there's 5 companies, Syngenta, Monsanto, and 3 others that like 60 or 65 or 70% of the pesticides they own and distribute, and same amount of seeds that they own. So they own the seeds, they own the pesticides. That's what I mean. This is a food issue. If you control the food and you can control, what people eat and how they get their food, you control the people.
That's right.
And to me, that's what's going on. It's a matter of people taking. And this is a democracy. It's not a corporatocracy. It's a democracy. At least that's what the Constitution says. And so people are just trying to take a little bit of their power back, and they want to know what's in their food, and I think they have every right to. It's bullshit that Monsanto is able to sue people who all they want to do is be able to know what's in their food, in spite of our guests saying they're being disingenuous on some of the terminology he said about what is going on with the GMOs, with the resistance to GMOs. So there's a lot of other measures on. So which one did you pull out of the hat?
Well, I suppose you wanted to talk about the marijuana.
The legalization of marijuana. He was also against that as well.
Yeah, which was fine, but his argument, why not see how Colorado and what's the other state?
Washington across
yeah.
the river. Well, Colorado seems to be doing a pretty good job of it. Washington, they're having some issues. But, you know, if it's the right thing to do, it's the right thing to do. It's the same thing with genetic engineered labeling. If it's the right thing to do, why worry about some of the problems with it? I mean, Oregon is always, not always, but Oregon has had the bottle bill. Oregon has been first in other things. And of course that bottle bill must have cost people money, you know, to print 5-cent deposit on it or whatever.
That was a good idea.
That was a good idea, and people went through with it. And if this is a good idea, the thing that's going to cause a little problems and let everybody else iron out all the issues, it's kind of like, I really have issues with that particular, and you hear that a lot. You say, let's let other states do it. Let's see how it works out in other states so we can have an easy go of it. Well, you know, if it's the right thing to do, and I'm saying if, then, you know, that shouldn't be, to me, an issue with that.
It says here, taxes the manufacture, sale, and use of marijuana in Oregon, state and local expenditures and all that. Does that mean state's going to get involved in?
I think further on down there it says that, yeah, the state will be, will have to be setting up some kind of guidelines, and I think that the OLCC might have, they will be the ones in charge of the places that dispense it.
Okay. So.
And it's going to take, I think, 2016 before it's implemented. And I marked here, remaining revenue beyond expenses, you know, the expenses that it's going to cost, $300,000 the first year, $2.5 million the second year, $1.0 million in 2017 for the OLCC to implement this.
Yeah.
And then the remaining revenue beyond these expenses, and there will be some, will be distributed as follows: 40% to the Common School Fund, 20% to the Mental Health, Alcoholism and Drug Service account, 15% to the State Police account, 10% to cities for law enforcement, 10% to counties for law enforcement, and 5% to the Oregon Health Authority for alcohol and drug abuse prevention. So they're doing, it looks like they're doing some really good things with the money.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, I don't know how much money they're bringing in Colorado or Washington. Washington, I think, is a little slower on the uptake.
Oh,
but there's millions of dollars coming in from this, which
Yeah.
isn't a reason why you should pass it. You know, I think that making gambling as legal as they did in order to get the revenue, you know, if you think it's bad, don't do it because it's going to bring in money.
Yeah,
You know,
that's right.
I
Exactly
think that
right.
really sucked. That was a terrible way to go, and it's created, it's brought money into the coffers, but it's also addicted a lot of people.
That's right.
And you know, that's what they're saying. You know, that's what I think their partner here was saying, that, you know, it's a gateway drug, and it's going to be some issues with down the road. You know, there's nothing really new coming out on the no side. Gateway drug. It's going to get into the children's hands, you know, and there's the same old arguments against it, and there's been no really new arguments against it that I've seen. And from what I've seen, you know, people, you know, high school kid, even people younger than high school, they can get this. They can get marijuana. Marijuana is easy to get.
Yeah.
And it's making it easier to get, I think, is not making sense to me, because it's out there all over the place, and that's what a lot of people that are doing this are saying. It, you know, regulate it, make it legal and regulate it, make it hard for kids. You know, make it impossible for kids to get it. Kids are getting into their parents' pharmaceutical pills in their medicine cabinets. They're getting into their poisons underneath the cabinet, in the kitchen sink. Kids get into things, and all you can do, you just do your best to stop it from happening. You can't not pass a law or not make something available, because there's going to be some problems with it, because everything causes problems.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, they didn't stop to think about this with tobacco. They didn't stop to think about how many thousands of people die with cars every year, and alcohol.
Right.
You know, I got a bunch.
Alcohol, yes, is a big one.
I got a sticker on my car that says, marijuana's been known to fight cancer. Alcohol's been known to cause fights. You know, there's never going to be any issues with, you know, marijuana makes people more passive. I didn't say that there can't be some issues with it, especially if you're younger.
Okay.
Come to find out, there's studies now that if you're really young and you're smoking marijuana, it affects your brain as
Kind of goes into it. That's right.
your brain is forming. So it isn't like you can just it's totally like I almost going to say like eating candy, but sugar is really the gateway drug to me. I mean,
yes.
we get addicted to sugar at a young age, and it rots your teeth, and it creates a lot of addictions down the road too. So I think that in the remaining time here, 8 minutes, I mean, marijuana is something that if folks want to, I brought the Chief Petitioner on my weekly show, Growing Concern, every Friday night at 7 o'clock. Folks listening now want to hear what the Chief Petitioner had to say. He was on for half an hour. I posted it up to the YouTube. Just go to youtube.com/philosopherseed, the 2 words philosopherseed put together, youtube.com/philosopherseed. And hear what he had to say. I interviewed him for half an hour, like I said, and he kind of laid down all the stuff that's on this piece of paper right here that talked about, what it was going to do and what it couldn't do. It's incredible that there's all kinds of breakdown on the money they're going to be able to make and where they're going to put it. And that, to me, that is probably what is in a lot of people's minds, especially in Salem. That if it's passed, then they're going to have to deal with making the laws, and they're going to have the money coming in. So we'll see what they do with it. Mm-hmm. I know that there was an article in the Oregonian recently that there's a lot of people who have these medical marijuana places who, they may lose some money over this, but they're concerned that the medical marijuana laws, even though this 36 pages of this says that the medical marijuana aspect of this will not be bothered at all. It says it 3 times. They will not change anything. But there are people who are concerned that might happen. It almost happened up in Washington where the Olympia wanted to change the rules around medical marijuana a little bit to bring in more money. And there are people concerned about that, and that is one of my main concerns, that could be changed. Yeah. And make it so that the medical marijuana people will have be able to have less, grow less, or have less. Mm-hmm. And some of the qualifications, PTSD, which just recently was passed, and cancer and pain and these different things. Some folks need this medication, and it works. I know of people who have cut down by 50% their use of opiate drugs because of pain and cancer and these different things, and it does help.
I can speak to that. I know of this one incident where this poor guy couldn't even eat unless he took marijuana. Mm-hmm. I wonder if there's other people that have that same problem.
Sure. Well, it's used a lot for chemotherapy because you lose your appetite. Oh. It's really, it's called the munchies, and marijuana has always been that way. Okay. And it's also there was Sanjay Gupta had something called Weed on TV, very good, talking about how there's THC in marijuana, but there's also CBDs in marijuana and a whole host of other ingredients, not the right word, but it's the one I'm thinking of at the moment. And they have hybridated marijuana in such a way now that there are flowers and products coming from marijuana that have very low THC but very high CBDs. And young people can take this and they don't get high.
What are those? Could you explain a little?
What's that? The CBD is it's cannabidiol. Okay. And tetrahydrocannabinol, and there's like a bunch of others too. Okay. And a THCA, a CBDA. It gets really chemically complicated, and I can't speak to all that. But I do know that Sanjay Gupta, he was interviewing a young girl who was she's pretty young, and she was having 300 seizures a week, and with taking this Rick Simpson oil, which is made from the marijuana plant, she was having 1 a week. I mean, wow. that's you can't argue with that.
No.
And so
Somebody gets the
course,
benefit.
We're getting off into the medical marijuana there at that point, but at the same time, people should be able to, if they can they can go buy beer, they can go buy whiskey, they can go buy alcohol that is legislated and regulated. Why can we not do the same thing with something else? I mean, people don't think twice about going to the doctor and getting opiate drugs, you know, Oxycontin and Vicodins and all that. That's all very fine, but they want to scream and yell about the medical uses of marijuana. It doesn't make sense to me, which isn't addicting, which doesn't constipate you, doesn't make a lot of people sick and throw up, like opiates do. So, you know, the hypocrisy of it, if that's the right word in some cases, it's just overwhelming, and I don't understand it. This needs to be dealt with. This prohibition has been going on for 80 years now, 80 or 90 years, since the 30s, and you know, maybe making it legal isn't the right step, but it has been forced to be the next step because of how it's been conducted. Thousands of people going to jail, some of them, you know, given 10-year sentences for a couple of joints.
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
what was happening in the past.
And that's what the guy on my show said, is that we can spend all that money, you know, in prosecuting real criminals and putting that money in places where it's more useful. So, you know, I can see why people have a reluctance to this. It's totally understandable given the 90 years of indoctrination and propaganda that's been coming our way. It's classified. It's just like heroin and all that, and that needs to be changed. You know, that would be a good step rather than making it legal. But anyway, we got less than 2 minutes. You may have a few things to add here.
I just want to make sure we thank the crew for making this all possible. Just can't do this without the crew coming in and doing what they do.
Pushing the buttons.
And
pushing the right buttons.
And that includes that
those photographs.
Beautiful photograph up there. I almost feel like I've been super honored just to be in front of that.
To be that, yeah. Well, we're living in an area that is beautiful like that.
Yeah.
And before we move on, there's another what do you call it, measure that's called open primaries. I think it's what, 90? And I've got some folks coming on my show the 24th, 7 o'clock Friday night, the 24th, and I've got Barbara Dudley, who's a very progressive lawyer and used to be the ED of USA Greenpeace, and Dan Meek, a local lawyer.
Oh, yeah.
And Dan Meek's against it, and she's for it. And they're both progressive, and they're both, she's going to be speaking, you know, she's got an article on Blue Oregon, and I don't know if there's anything to get to what he's got going, but they're both coming down on opposite sides. So that'd be October 24th at 7 o'clock, and I'll post it on YouTube as well. So we can because I haven't made my mind up on this one either.
Oh, okay.
So I guess we thank the crew.
That's right.
And we'll be back in another month. Thanks for tuning in.